founder Renegade and CMO huddles, author Renegade Marketing, LinkedIn Top Marketing Voices 2022. Arrow's a great case. So Arrow Electronics is basically, think of a giant warehouse with a million parts. And they sell these parts to giant companies who build everything from rocket ships to cars to almost anything that can be built. They would buy the parts from Arrow. And so they created a race car that a paraplegic driver could actually drive. And they used all the parts and they engineered it. And it was such an incredible story as this poor gentleman who had a bad crash and could no longer drive, and how they built this story up over time. And I always like to say this because for CMOs in particular, the most effective sentence that they can ever say to a board or the C-suite in a meeting is, "So I was talking to a customer the other day."
Okay, alternate profession could have been?
Spy/ping pong player.
Hello, fellows. Welcome to the next episode of Jagged with Just Ravi. Subscribe to my channel for conversations at the edge with thought leaders from the marketing, branding, and the business world. Conversations that ignite new ideas. Ideas that have rough and sharp edges. Hi, Drew. So nice to have you on my show.
Thank you, Jasravi. It's great to be here. And by the way, the sharp edges thing speaks to me. You might see a saw in the background. That's all about cutting through. So let's get to the sharp edges.
Yay. Thank you. I'm so happy to hear that. Okay. If I requested you to tweet your profile, Drew, what would you say?
Well, first of all, I'd say, given that Twitter is on such shaky grounds, I would refer you to my LinkedIn mini profile. And it says, founder Renegade and CMO huddles, author Renegade Marketing, LinkedIn Top Marketing Voices 2022, host podcast for B2B CMOs, Ad Age CMO columnist, keynote speaker, B2B CMO coach, wannabe time traveler, Ben Franklin nut. It's a lot.
Yeah, but that's you. I mean, wonderful. Just a few minutes back, we were bonding on our JWT connection. But now what we'll be talking about is advertising is just one part of it. It is marketing. It is renegade marketing. And why did you name it thus? What did you feel marketing books were not presenting to the readers that you chose this subject? So this is 12 principles, playbook for B2B marketers, but I definitely think it goes beyond. It's applicable to all brands and businesses. Yes, Drew.
First, I agree with you. And the reason why I focused on B2B was mainly because in the book, I talk about focus so much, and you got to have a focus. So I put the B2B in there, but there are very few components in the book that don't apply to B2C. Now, in terms of why did I write the book? So we started noticing about 5 years ago that B2B marketing in particular had gotten ridiculously complicated. And we wanted to make sure that that premise was valid. So we went out in the market in 2019 and 2020, actually, right after the pandemic. So we did 2 waves of about 130 B2B CMOs. And sure enough, 90% said, yes, it had gotten significantly more complicated in the last 12 to 24 months. And the cause was pretty clear: more data, more channels, more just stuff. And what there wasn't a corresponding connection was with more effectiveness. So more complicated, but not more effective. And so what I thought about is kind of what we've been practicing for the last 10 years, but also what would be the best practices based on 400 plus B2B CMO interviews that I had done over the last 10 plus years. And that's how we got to Renegade Marketing, with the goal of radically simplifying. What could we get rid of that would sort of address the complexity, pull the complexity out, and get to a place. And of course, we called it Renegade Marketing, conveniently because we have an agency called Renegade, but also because I just think it's a good mindset.
Yeah, brilliant. So, Drew, I love from the very beginning, it kind of makes it very clear that this is this is, like you said, whatever you're saying about marketing, the book is also approaching the entire subject like that. It's rich, it's layered, but it cuts to the point with that saw always, So this whole thing about, how do consumers think about us is one thing. How do consumers think about us vis-a-vis competitors is another thing. But what you really need to focus about is how do consumers think about themselves? And marketing is about change. Okay, so you have these 4 beautiful sections: courageous strategy, artful ideation, thoughtful execution, and scientific method. So one by one, and this is like the 4 pillars, that kind of construct the entire structure of marketing for you.
Yeah, and let me explain that first real quick, because part of the thing was I've interviewed so many CMOs. I mean, it's over 500. And so I've seen a lot of successful CMOs and ones that seem to be on this, 1 year done kind of thing. And I see the same mistakes and the same successes over and over and over again. And it really boils down to these 4 things: that they're courageous with their strategy, they're artful in how they create the ideas, not just the idea themselves. They're thoughtful in the way they execute. And finally, they're measuring. And so those CATS adds up to CATS. It's a little, little acronym, and they are cool cats. I'm telling you that they are very hard to find. Not every CMO has all of these things, and it's hard. It's a really hard job. I have tremendous empathy for them. So this book was written from a place of empathy.
Oh, how nice. I mean, these cool cats also have it, empathy and humility, to be able to do that. And like you've said, it's almost like a magician's job. There is science here, there is art here, there is courage, there is thoughtfulness. I mean, it's really a lot packed in. Yeah,
it is. And the pandemic just put a greater emphasis on the need for this. And that was the thing when I wrote the book. By the way, I was 3/4 of the way done before the pandemic began. And I put the book down for 6 months to see if the principles would still apply. And in fact, they did, even more so. And that also gave me another 6 months to have cases, because I didn't want to have this book go to market and, okay, well, that's irrelevant because, COVID changed everything. It turned out that courageous strategy, that's something that will never go away. Yeah.
Yes. And Drew, you've talked, I love how you've talked about courage. And there are 3 parts to it. So here, let's look at all 3. How you would like to start? What would you like to talk about? I just first read this out. Marketing has become way more complicated, but really more effective. Be the Marie Kondo of marketing. Be the Marie Kondo of marketing. Simplicity and focus are your new besties. Now, in that, you talk about courage, you talk about breaking the clutter, and how purpose, hinging on that, anchoring on that, can make all the difference. So which examples would you like to take, and how would you like to bring it alive for our audience?
I always have to start with this because so we started CMO Huddles in April of 2020. So I'm also talking to 50, 60, 70 CMOs every month in these roundtables. And one of the things that we noticed in the pandemic that really is just horrible is how they were, even though they weren't commuting, they were working longer hours. And the reason was they had so many meetings. And so this first chapter is clear away the clutter. I'm telling you, you can't do your job right now unless you focus on that first. You've got to clear your calendar. You've got to give yourself hours every day to be thinking about the big things. And unfortunately, a lot of CMOs these days are just go from meeting to meeting to meeting. And by the time they actually get to thinking time, they're exhausted. It's too late. So this, I would say, if there's a chapter in the book that is more relevant than ever, it is clear away the clutter. And I don't care what job you have right now. If you think about how you're spending your time relative to what matters for the organization, chances are 70% of your time is in meetings that are not advancing the organization. So, full stop, because you can't get to the next steps if you don't have this ability. And this is where leadership has to have the courage to say, we don't have 100 goals. We have 3 big ones, right? Because if the leadership will say we have big goals, then everybody else can sort of figure out how their goals align with the big goals. And this gets to operating systems and things that companies need to have. But when you have these few priorities, then the CMO can say, hey, you have my permission, head of content, to say no. We're not going to do that little piece for that one sales guy. No. And again, then we buy time to focus on the things like Pounce on your purpose or daring to be distinct or some of the other areas that I talk about in the book.
Yeah, and that's where the courage starts, like saying no and
saying no, yeah.
Or picking 1 or 2 things that you're going to focus on for the entire year, or thinking through to arrive at that. Okay. So if you could take some examples, like I have some with me, the distinctive, dare to be distinct. You have an arrow example, if you would like to talk about that. And Pounce on purpose, there is Ben and Jerry there.
Yeah, so on daring to be distinct, Arrow's a great case. So Arrow Electronics is basically, think of a giant warehouse with 1 million parts. And they sell these parts to giant companies who build everything from rocket ships to cars to almost anything that can be built. They would buy the parts from Arrow. And so you could say, what could be more generic than that? And what Arrow and the head of marketing at the time decided to do was say, it's not the parts, it's what you do with them. And so let us create something amazing as an example of what 5 years out might look like. And that was their vision, was that we're 5 years out in terms of what you could do with the stuff that we have right now. And so they created a race car that a paraplegic driver could actually drive. And they used all the parts and they engineered it. And it was such an incredible story as this poor gentleman who had a bad crash and could no longer drive, and how they built this story up over time. It's just, and then they sponsored races and they brought the guy there and they had the race car. And it was a beautiful program that demonstrated a mindset of, will help you plan and develop products into the future. And again, that's a very difficult concept to demonstrate. And so what they showed it though, right? Didn't say it. They could have just said, hey, we're 5 years out. They showed it. So that was a real daring thing in my mind. So now Pounce on your purpose. So here's a challenge that most brands have. Is their soap is not that much different, or their detergent is not that much different from anybody else's detergent. And so if you look at the what or the how dimension of the brand, it's hard to find. Well, how you work, is it really different? Probably not. What you do that different? Maybe not. Why you do it, that could be a different. And so in that chapter, I give people, marketers, a little bit of a break here. I don't say you have to save the world, because that's ridiculous. Ben and Jerry's is an ice cream, and their initial purpose was to make ice cream fun again. That's not save the world purpose. That's not, save the planet or anything like that. Ultimately, they also created brands like Rainforest Crunch that, raise some money for the rainforest, to protect the rainforest and that kind of thing. And that merges into Big P purpose. But let's face it, it's an ice cream. You're not going to save the world with ice cream, but you are, bring a smile and you're going to make it fun again. So there's Big P purpose and little P purpose. And I think brands can find either. And this was something I spoke with the founder of Kind Snacks. He was just looking for a snack when he was traveling the world, he was actually trying to solve the Middle East crisis through food, but he couldn't find a healthy snack. So he created Kind Snacks, built that company up, eventually created the Kind Foundation, and really trying to bring kindness in a world right now where there isn't a lot. So little P purpose sometimes can go to Big P purpose, but it is one of the key ways of differentiating your brand. If you can find a purpose that you can can really lean into.
Yeah, like you, when you've talked about distinctiveness, you've said, why stop there? Try and be unique. So after a point, this purpose makes the brand, gives them an aura, a credibility, the entire, actions that they have done, projects that they've taken, it just makes them so unique. Yeah, it's also linked that because they've dared to commit to something, they have owned up something that they want to be held accountable for. Drew, even the Arrow example, I mean, there's such a lot of investment into a vision and then bringing it alive, and and then because you will be held accountable from there on to live up to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you put a promise out in the marketplace, you've got to deliver it. And I talk later in the book about the difference between sort of a tagline and a purpose-driven story statement. And one is an empty promise and one is a promise delivered. I wanted to sort of help folks think about this for a second. And because in the book, I talk a little bit about Ethan Allen and IKEA and the difference. Both are distinct brands, but I would argue that IKEA from start to finish is truly a unique brand. Very few brands get to IKEA where every aspect of the experience is unique. But if you're a marketer, that's a dream, right? Is that from the way the products are designed to the way the products are sold to the experience to the everything. I mean, to me, I think every marketer aspires to help their company get to that kind of a place.
Awesome. So, Drew,
yes.
You're talking about how it would not just be a tagline and all the difference it can make. So when you have taken up Artful Ideation, there is one of the sub points is perfect Pithy. Find your 8-word story first. Now, why should that matter? I mean, you can define everything in one line. It'll have what, how, what, the positioning statements that we have, and everybody will get it and we can work with it, right? Why do we need perfect Pithy and how powerful that can be? Could you please share it with an example?
So what I've discovered, and this is particularly a problem for B2B, B2C gets this inherently, but B2B doesn't. B2B will say, we've got this incredible product that does all of these amazing things. And here's the way it integrates. And here's the other back end. And here's the really cool stuff and the speeds and the feeds and the widgets and everything. And oh, it's awesome. And it's like engineers, right? Talking about the code. The problem is there's a limited amount of space in our brains, period. End of story. Of all brains, no matter how big your brain is, you have a limited amount of space, and every brand, whether B2B or B2C, is fighting for some corner of the brain of their target audience. And you got to give people an anchor idea to hang on to so that, and it can be, it doesn't have to be. I sort of copped out in the book. Look, there's positioning, there's a tagline, and then there's what I call a purpose-driven story statement. For the argument's sake, in the book, to keep it simple, I merged all those together. I know the difference between positioning and a tagline. A positioning is game detergent, smell as proof of clean. Best positioning line ever. If I smell the clothes and they smell good, then they're clean, right? That signal is one of the most brilliant positioning statements ever. And from there, you can go on. To create an ad, all you have to do is show a person smelling clothes, right? And that's what B2C does really well. B2B, they have no idea how to do that. So then what we try to do is say, okay, let's come up with something called a purpose-driven story statement where you're going to make a commitment to the marketplace and you're going to deliver on it against employees, customers, and prospects. So I'm going to give you an example of the difference between a tagline and a positioning statement. And by the way, I wrote this line 20 some odd years ago. I think it's the best line I ever wrote. And I've written a lot of good taglines. And it's a tagline. It's not a purpose-driven story statement. And it's for a magazine called Family Circle. And they were looking for a way to bring together an advertising campaign and a consumer campaign for the magazine. And again, this is 25 years ago when they were one of the top female targeted family sort of magazines. And we said, okay, here's the idea where family comes first. And by the way, family is before circle. It's very clever. It's like this got this thing. And we said, it's more than a tagline though. You could move the chapter in your magazine called Family to the first chapter. You could do a research study and be the global expert on what family means in the US or just in that. You could have a symposium. You could have the best family leave policy in the business. All of these things we laid out for them. They said, thanks. That's great. They put it on the magazine cover. It sat on the spine of the magazine for 19 years. It's a long time for a tagline. Great, yay. But they never made it real. They never actually executed. And this was long before Start With Why. This was long before people were looking for purpose-driven type marketing. But it was so the difference is you can make this big promise, but you got to deliver against it. And so a purpose-driven story statement, those 8 words. And the reason this is so important is if your employees can't articulate a promise to the marketplace, if your customers can't play back why you exist, how do you expect to get prospects? How do you expect to get prospects to think about your business and find some mind space for them? And, we have another a client we've worked with for years where it was case paper. Again, pretty generic. They sell paper, but the purpose-driven story statement was on the case. On the case. And we defined it for the employees. You're resourceful, responsible, and you're resourceful, responsive, and reliable. Okay. On the case. It's a pun. It's silly. They had fun with it. Big difference. They committed to on the case awards for employees, and every month employees got recognized for extraordinary customer service. They committed it to their customers, and they made it real. And it's been going for about 3 years now. And they're killing it. I mean, and they're selling paper, but they're on the case.
Yeah.
So big difference. Same idea, same simple 8 words or less, one of which is driving a company forward and the other sat on the spine of a magazine.
Mm-hmm. And Drew, the beauty of the examples that you took is very evident because there's such a lot of depth of thinking to identify what is this business or brand going to be about, and then saying it in an evocative manner, which is relatable for the consumer. It's simple, you get it, and it evokes a response to understanding the difference, the distinctiveness of the company. So it is artful ideation. Right. Now we go to the next one, thoughtful execution. So I really want that my audiences get a flavor of all the 4 pillars. So thoughtful execution. Now, there are many aspects to it, but one where you've talked about do what it takes to engender brand love, make the customers the heroes of your story, inspire them to share the wonders of your product, service. Yeah. So when you say, when there was this one takeaway, every CMO should have at least a few customers on speed dial. I said that kind of really nuances it because most marketers believe that, what customers think and we know. I mean, we keep doing research, even if you're doing research. I mean, this is the kind of relationship that only a few FMCG brands also would have, like a household panel, like checking, not being too presumptuous about consumers' life and reality, and the fact that they're evolving all the time and exposed to new stimulus all the time. So what do you mean by this? And of course, you're saying it in the context of B2B businesses. Have customers on speed dial. How to achieve this?
So it's some companies, and it's not the majority by any chance. It's a small minority of companies, and I know a few of them, and I've interviewed those CMOs. They have what they call an executive sponsor program. So everybody in the C-suite, whether it's the CFO, the CEO, the CIO, you name it, they all have at least 5 key customers who they are part of the pitch team, and they are presented as the lead person, the one neck to choke if there's ever a problem. So this is, first of all, these are large customers, so it's worth the time. But that what it means then is suddenly the CMO is in the position that normally the head of customer service might be, or the head of sales might be. They're on the hook for the performance in the relationship between that customer. And so the advantage is and because everybody's doing it, everyone in the C-suite feels the pain of a new product rollout. Everybody sees the joy when something goes well, and collectively they have a greater understanding of where the business is. And where you see C-suites fall apart is when they lose touch with their customers. And I always like to say this because for CMOs in particular, the most effective sentence that they can ever say to a board or the C-suite in a meeting is, "So I was talking to a customer the other day." And by the way, there is no bad outcome from that sentence. and so just the notion of whether or not you have an executive sponsor program, it is so easy for you to convene customers. It's just, they want to talk to each other, particularly in B2B. So if you're the catalyst to bring them together, you're going to be a hero to begin with. But yeah, own some customers, take that responsibility. It's a big step forward for CMOs to really add to the list. Because again, I said we got to get stuff off the list, but I break this business down into very simple. You have employees, you have customers, and you have prospects, right? Those are your 3 audiences. And you, the CMO, want to be measured against all 3 of those. Well, you can't be measured against customers if you aren't engaged with customers.
So, like you've said, this is a gift. Good engagement with customers is a gift that keeps giving. Could you talk about a few of the ways that CMOs would like to know that, yes, this keeps giving, this kind of
right.
a relationship? If you've already covered quite a lot, but
right. Well, there's a couple of things that you can do and look at this when you think about customer engagement, and we call it cultivate customer champions, right? That's the chapter. So you can create a customer advisory board, which is pretty easy. And most customers that you ask to do it will be honored when you ask, because it's another thing that they can put on their LinkedIn profile. I'm on the customer advisory board. But they really want to. And so these folks, let's say it could be 10, it could be 30, are the ones who get the sneak peek on the roadmap. These are the ones who on the roadmap for what your future product development will look like. Those folks can weigh in. If you're going to do a price increase, you can do a quick check and say, "Hey, we got to do a price increase because our costs are going up." They'll give you the headline on that. And that's very, very high level. And I know a lot of B2B brands have customer advisory boards. And if you don't, you should. Okay. The next area, we'll call it, is a user community. And this works for some customers better than it does others, but it's particularly true in software. The ideal world, we'll hear this a lot, and you'll say, "Hey, we want to create a category." I think that's a fool's errand. I think what you want to do is create a community. If you build a community, the category will follow. And in the book, I tell the story of Tableau, which started out with like a couple hundred people at their first user conference and ended up with 12,000 7 years later. Those people who came to that conference identified as Tableauians. They looked at data visualization as a career building opportunity. So suddenly Tableau and these users were connected at the hip. Every brand wants to be there, right? You want to have customers whose lifestyle, whose business opportunity is going through your brand. And so you could feel that at a community level. There's all sorts of ways of supporting a community these days. You can do it online. You can do it in person. In the book, I outline, if anybody, by the way, listening to the show wants that chapter, I'm more than happy to send them the chapter, because I think I list about 10 ways that you can build customer communities.
Awesome. And it's so powerful because you're creating a culture, subculture, You're going to own some rituals, and if you're going to grow together, it's going to take a life of its own. So
it's true. And I think I'm going to make one point here. So why is it called Renegade Marketing? You asked that if you look, and this is particularly true in B2B, what is the mandate of a CMO? Most will say drive revenue, and within that, they'll say net new customers. And what I say is that's backwards, because they'll say our goal is drive revenue, keep customers happy, and then maybe employees even. And I reverse that in the book and say the Renegade marketer puts employees first, customers second, and prospects third. And that's a really that's the jagged edge here that I want you to think about is if your employees aren't happy at the company, they don't believe in the vision, what are you doing? Because you're not building a big company. You're not building a great company. You're probably VC backed or PE backed and just looking to flip. Okay, that's a way of doing it, but that's not a way of building a great company.
Awesome. Okay, so that reminds me of another chapter, selling service. Okay, but we won't get there. We first have to.
Well, let me give you 1 second on that, because I think it's so important. So eventually we're going to get to prospects, and we're going to say we need to get prospects because we got to grow the business. We need new customers. And what I want you to start to think about is not messaging, but action. What can you do? What is your small business Saturday, like American Express, which helped them fit between Black Friday and Cyber Monday? What is it that you can do for them that will help them? And if you solve that, then you've solved your marketing problem, because now you're not messaging, you're helping them. Your marketing has become a service.
Wow, that's really cutting edge. And that is what can change the world. And that is what makes marketing so valuable, an exercise, actually, isn't it? So, yeah, okay. So then now your magician, cool cat, creative, daring, heroic warrior has to be scientist also. Now, that's really too much, but fine.
Well, it's true. And I will say that you could be courageous, artful, and thoughtful and still lose. And that's why you have to have some science. And the good news is today there's so much good data measurement tools out there that it's not that hard. I think I know a lot of marketers who are only the S in cats. And I think that's problematic because, and I can explain why, but you've got to have the metrics. So let's just go there.
Yeah. So the essence of this section says work with your CFO and data chief to develop metrics that matter for employee satisfaction, customer advocacy, and prospect interest. Now, that's the hierarchy you established just now, that is the satisfaction. First employees, then customer advocacy, and then prospect interest. Therein also, I think this is the critical thing that you've said, Drew, that how do you arrive at the metrics that are going to matter, that you're going to really evaluate? Like few initial decisions, the few priorities that you talked about. So if you could, help summarize this aspect, which is really challenging, but more because, like you said, that the data has come, so much data has come, and the algorithms keep evolving, and all the different new age media. I mean, it's like nobody really understands, and yet there is so much change happening, so much jargon, being thrown at each other. So what should be the most important metrics to measure?
Right. So there's two ways of answering this question. The first is, what are the metrics that matter to your CEO and your board? And you have to know those. And ideally, a CMO who goes into taking a job understands that and has agreement with the CEO and the CFO. These are the metrics that matter. And every CEO will say revenue, right? Revenue is what matters because they're under pressure from the board to increase revenue. Okay, get it. Not going to argue that revenue is a metric that matters. But for CMOs, the problem with that metric in B2B is it's a lagging metric. because sales cycles are 6 to 12 months. And so revenue that you're doing 6 months from now that you're closing does not, you need other metrics that help show what you're doing is working, right? And so this is where CMOs often fall apart, which is they focus on these micro metrics that get to revenue, and nobody cares about those in the board. So where we got to do is we're going to go back to this and again say, and CMOs are famous for presenting too many numbers. You don't need too many numbers. You need a few numbers, and with the opportunity to let people go under the hood if they need to. You're always going to have to address revenue one way or another. And I get that. But let's say you have 4 buckets of measurement that you need to cover: employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction, prospect, we'll call it sales velocity for lack of a better term, and then brand. And brand matters because we're about to go, or probably already are, in a recession. And in a recession, stronger brands win. Always do. It's always happens. And so if you don't have any kind of brand health metrics in place, then you're silly. Now you've got a smaller group of metrics to live by. Right? If in a declining market, as the boats are going here, a stronger brand can steal share. A weaker brand can't. So ESAT is employee satisfaction. There are lots of ways of measuring that. Easy to measure, easiest of all. Customer satisfaction, really looking at 2 values. One, are they happy? Will they but I really want to know, are they going to do something for you? NPS is useless for the most part, which is crazy to say because it's not completely useless. It just doesn't tell you anything other than where you are at this moment, but it doesn't tell you why. And it doesn't really, it just says, yeah, maybe I'll recommend you. I'll recommend you. That's nothing. I want to know what your real references are. I want to know whether you have case studies and you'll do a case study. What's the percentage of renewals? There's all these good metrics that you could use that would be a true measure of your brand health with customers. And this is so important because marketing impacts this, right? Let's say you have a customer advisory board and you have a community built. By the way, customers are going to get you through this recession. They're the ones who are going to buy, keep buying, and they're going to be the case studies that are going to allow you to get any new customers. So it all comes back to, how are you measuring your customer success and what role does marketing play in that? Okay, I'm sorry. I went on a rant.
Not at all. Not at all. You've also talked about, for the sake of those CMOs who cannot invest in full-time, full-fledged studies, which take time, resources into this thing. So blended brand health tracker and blended brand awareness tracker, any one that you think is more critical or both, if you could just help marketers understand that you can do it if you're committed to it. You don't always just have to rely on one big, huge study, costly study.
Right. And this is the funny thing, the big difference between B2C and B2B. Every B2C brand I worked on, packaged goods brand at JWT and Chiat always had a brand tracker, which sometimes they were in the market all year long. Sometimes they would do it twice a year, but they always were measuring awareness, unaided and aided awareness, saliency, as in what do they know about the brand, and sort of some other metrics related to strength. Those are expensive. It's hard to do those cost effectively, 100, 200,000 a year probably to do those. So the brand health tracker that you mentioned in the book is, we're going to take 5 metrics, which you have access to. For example, percentage of category searches of your brand name on Google. That's public information. You can go in and see how often are people searching that. And then you can say, well, how often are they searching the key competitors? Pick 2. And then you figure out, well, we had 10,000 category searches and our competitors had 50. So our share is 10 of 60. And you can look at percentage of mentions of your brand name on social media, percentage of positive mentions, share of positive reviews on comparison sites, share of media mentions. And some people use a PR tool like a Meltwater for that. And you might even look at follower growth, although I'd probably take that one out. So those first 5, You say, we're just going to weight them evenly. We're going to track them. We can track them on a monthly basis. And we're going to give each of them 20 out of 100. And then you add that up and you can track it over time and see how you're doing. And if your mentions of your brand are going down, and if positive mentions are going down and your reviews are going down, your brand health is a problem. And if you see it going up, you go, you know what? I think our marketing is working.
Yeah. So, Drew Nessier, you made all of us wiser. Now, you've talked about cats, the marketers as cats. And now if you could tell us more about Renegade marketing. And then I have taken some lines from your book that I want to say. Maybe I should just say it because I want your words. I want you to sum up after this. Okay, marketing isn't a beauty contest. The best logo, the coolest colors, the snappiest tagline. It's about understanding human behavior at a sufficiently deep level to lead customers to appreciate, embrace, and then act on the kinds of change that can materially improve their own organization, and in case of B2C, their own life. So in fact, at its absolute aspirational best, Renegade marketing is about making the world a better place. And that is going to take our age, creativity, insight, and most importantly, a deep sense of humility and empathy. Isn't that amazing? It's like, yeah, I mean, you can feel proud. A CMO can feel proud. This is what we do. You see, this is what it takes. So what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a lifetime marketer. I've been doing this for 4 decades. I still enjoy the challenge of boiling things down to their essence, creating a single plan on a page. Imagine that, where, because you look at marketing plans and they're like 300 pages and say, stop, I want 1 page. What are you doing for employees, customers, and prospects? You get 6 things. Keep it simple. And the humility part of this is the biggest mistake I see marketers doing. And then I ask the question, who's the hero of your story? And because you'll look at their everything, it's chest beating. And there are times where you can take that position where you're just so damn good that, you can just be the hero of your own story. But for 99% of brands, it doesn't work. The hero of your story is your customer. Sometimes the hero of his story is your employees. Literally, I know an insurance company that built their entire brand based on happy employees equals happy customers. And all they did was showcase their happy employees. Wait, what? Yeah, they didn't talk about insurance. All they did was talk about how happy their employees were. And that's it. That was their marketing. They ended up being bought for a huge multiple by a larger insurance company, who, of course, probably got rid of that. But imagine being able to talk about your brand without actually having to talk about your speeds and feeds. That's where marketing just is incredible. And it's possible in B2B too. I would say this, look, this is a business that is constantly evolving. And my favorite chapter, it's the way I like to end the conversation in the book is this last chapter of Testing to Triumph. There is a lot of room for innovation in B2B. It's expected in B2C, but they're there in B2B. And so testing to triumph, that's the fun part, folks. Even though it's in the scientific method section, it is the fun part. Figure out what's the crazy thing that you can do, still on brand, still on purpose, that you could try that would get your employees excited, that would get your customers excited. Sneak it into your budget. Make sure you have 10 to 20% of your budget going into experimentation. Those could be the things that will catapult you and you can invest more in. And that's the thing. You're looking for a small bet that could become a big bet. And again, that's, to me, that part of marketing hasn't changed. That's the fun part of marketing. We get to experiment, whether you're B2B or B2C. And then when you do those tests, the one thing that sometimes they forget is you're going to go to your CFO and you're going to say, I'm spending $500,000 on this program. These are the metrics that I'm looking to measure it by. If we exceed those metrics, are you good at investing more? Because there's no point in doing an experiment that you don't have agreement to expand. And so that's part of this, why we go back to welcoming we, and why you really, as a marketing leader, need to involve the other disciplines because you can't be successful on your own.
Okay, so Drew Nessier, this is rapid fire. We took it literally. Are you ready?
I am. Fire away.
Yay, mother's best advice.
Shut up.
Okay, alternate profession could have been?
Spy/ping pong player.
Okay, as for your wife, your most often used phrase?
What did you say?
So apt. Okay, one thing no one knows about you.
I don't know. I'm an open book.
Okay, a book you'd like to gift to all your friends and it can't be your own book.
The autobiography of Ben Franklin.
Okay, what would you like to tell your 18-year-old self?
Read more.
What's your favorite childhood memory?
Actually, I want to correct that. Write more. Favorite childhood memory. Riding a bike for the first time.
Okay, what is your greatest joy?
My family.
What is a lesson that took you a long time to learn?
You're not the smartest person in the room.
Okay, so it's a wrap up. Drew, I request you to share your online addresses, any emails. How can audiences reach you?
Sure. So find me on LinkedIn. It's Drew Nessier, Neisser. Hit me up there for anything that you need, or you can go to renegade.com and that we've got the book, we've got the podcast, the blog, newsletter. It's a great newsletter. Been writing it for 10 years. Always encourage marketers to check that out.
Okay. And we've talked about the books. Audiences know enough about the book. It's available on Amazon, and yeah, it's available online. So guys, go check it out.
Folks don't realize how much work a podcast is. What you're doing is awesome. And I think it really, go on Jasravi's LinkedIn saying, thank you for doing this show.
Thank you so much, Drew. It's been wonderful to have you on my show. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasravi. And thank you for doing the show. And I hope this selling through service exercise helps you in your business.